Good afternoon. I'm Joan Merrifield. I'm a teacher in Nanaimo and often teach on Gabriola Island. I identify as a lesbian, a dyke, and my pronouns are she and her. I came out in my first year of PDP and in the first year of my teaching practice. And I did live in fear of being outed or being compromised at school, or actually never being hired as a teacher in the school system. I also worried about being ostracized or just not feeling like I belonged in the school culture. As it was, one of my students saw me out on Commercial Drive, downtown Vancouver, and reported to all of my class that I was a lesbian at recess on Monday morning, several months into the school year, and she promptly left the school and didn't come back for 3 days. I thought she was sick. I didn't know what was going on. And when her mom brought her into the school, the principal came down to get me to come meet with mom and her. And on the way back to the meeting, he said to me, "I know many homosexuals. This is going to work out." And I thought, okay, here we go. It actually did kind of work out. I spent a long, high-quality conversation with my student, and we built a long, trusting relationship that lasted for the whole time she was in my class from grade 5 to grade 7. So it was really, really worthwhile that this sort of accident happened. What came out of that for me, though, was that I realized I had to find other LGBTQ teachers and start to work with them. And so then I joined Gale BC, and then I went from there to Pride Education Network. But I also realized I had to join my union and get involved. I mean, I was part of my union, but I had to get involved, and I had to find other colleagues who wanted to work on social justice issues and on homophobia and transphobia. And that took many years of my teaching career, and it's actually been that involvement in BCTF has actually directed my practice for all of the years that I've taught, for the last 25, 26 years. It has helped me bring social justice into my classroom every day, and has helped me be a reflective educator, to look at everything from a social justice lens, to put other lenses on top of that as well, and work collegially with my colleagues. It helped me bring motions to the AGM and go up to the mic and speak for the very first time as a new delegate. So the work that you do, aside from your teaching practice, which can direct it in social justice or Aboriginal ed or global education, is very, very powerful and can really make your career meaningful. Over the years, I've brought many things to the classroom. Recently I brought in the 8th Fire video that CBC has published by the author Wab Canoe, and it's about residential schools. So we watched the film in the class. This is a grade 7 class, and afterwards, when all the students left, my student teacher and I were talking about it, and a student came back in and said, "I just want to thank you for bringing that film to the classroom, because none of the kids in this classroom know about residential school, and my family was part of residential school, and I want you to know that it was powerful for me to hear this being taught in the classroom." She wasn't somebody you would typically have picked out as Aboriginal, and so I realized we never know who's in our classroom. We never know who's there, and we never know who is experiencing things at all different levels. And so we have to be prepared to understand that we don't know who's LGBTQ in our classrooms. We may know, some kids may be out, but we may not know. And so we have to act as if people are there, and we need to make our classroom a safe and inclusive space. I've heard many people say, well, things are getting better. And they are getting better, but there are many students and staff who feel that they can't come out, or they just feel different and they feel they don't belong. So I think that while things are getting better, there's always things that happen that we're maybe not aware of for our students about making them not feel like they belong or that they're part of the everyday classroom. And so just having books in our classroom, showing films, bringing in curriculum, bringing in guest speakers, all of these things let them know you are a significant teacher who they can come to and that they can stand and talk with you about things that are really deeply important to them. I've had some of the best conversations I've had with kids when everyone else has gone out for recess and one kid kind of hangs back and I'm writing something on the whiteboard and they're standing beside me talking to me about something very deep and personal. And those are the moments that we need to take to heart and learn from. And those are the moments that we take home and go, okay, I got to bring something into the classroom this week. And we have to talk about this. And I just think that we learn from our students as much as they learn from us. And I think I'll leave it there. We've got a long panel and we can always say more later. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joan. My name is David Butler. I'm from Newfoundland. I moved here about 12 years ago. As a young person, I lived in Korea teaching English, and I came back to Canada in my young 30s to get an education degree. I was raised Catholic, very oppressive system for a queer kid, especially in a small town in Newfoundland. But when I was 23, I came out, I think it was 1993, in Halifax, and I was quite angry, and I was an activist right from coming out. And I sort of carried that mentality of activism with me, except when I went to teach overseas, there was really not much I could do. But as soon as I got back to Canada and I started my education degree, this was like 2004, I think, at UBC. I knew there was like a lot that needed to be done in the education system, and I started to get involved. I went to a union, the first time I think they ever had an LGBTQ-focused professional development day. And guess who I met? The very first day I did something like that, I walked into a school and I met Glenn Hansman handing out pamphlets. Glenn was the previous president of the BCTF. Anyway, we struck up a friendship, and through knowing him, and I met Joan very quickly through the union and other activists, I became involved in education activism around social justice for LGBTQ things. Over the years, at first I was really involved in the union. I was on the committee, LGBTQ Action Committee for the Social Justice Committee, and I used to do workshops around the province for LGBTQ inclusion. But since then, I pretty much am now just a regular full-time classroom teacher. I teach elementary music here in Vancouver, and I guess I was saying to Lucy, I don't really do much anymore on an official level. I don't, in my school, I'm a typical teacher, but things around LGBTQ inclusion happen regularly in my teaching practice, and things happen weekly that I just think it's normal, and I never really think that I'm actually doing anything. But in having to prepare for this, I thought, okay, well, I have some stories. And the point of telling you these stories is that you don't have to do much to make a change. All you have to do is show the students that you are an ally, or that you think this is important, or that you support queer people. Here's an example. Just yesterday, I'm teaching ukulele to a grade 6-7 class, and they're kind of in the too cool for school stage. They're like, yeah, we know everything. And I'm trying to pipe them down, and I have a new song. And I say, hey, I'm actually playing this ukulele song in my ukulele band. And they're like, oh, you're in a ukulele band? I'm like, yeah, I'm in an all-girl ukulele band. And they're quiet, and one of the two girls are talking, and one says, but Mr. Butler, how can you be in an all-girl ukulele band? You're not a girl. And then her friend turned to, oh, I know why. It's because you're gay, right? So they let you in. I'm like, yeah, exactly. They took pity on me. So in that moment, they thought it was funny. It was just, I did it to make a joke, but I knew that two people in my class, one has actually two different students, one's a boy, one's a girl, they both have two moms. They come from same-sex families. And I know when I say stuff like that, they're listening, and they know that I'm gay. They've known I was gay for years, but I know it makes them feel safe. Just like when Joan's story of the student who came up after 8th Fire, they know when you do something in class, they feel safer. And I'm aware every time I do something, they feel safer. So the little things you do can have a big impact. It doesn't have to be a big lesson on anti-homophobia. It doesn't have to be a whole week of Day of Pink. It's in the small moments that there's powerful things that can happen. I just made some notes to myself this morning. I didn't want to forget some things. Just in general, like things that are current right now, it might seem like, wow, I thought this was done with already. Only this year did we implement gender-neutral washrooms. We talked about it for 2 years in the staff room, and the principal said, oh yes, let's identify a bathroom so it can be the gender-neutral bathroom, but there was a problem with this bathroom, we couldn't do it. There was a problem with this bathroom, we couldn't do it. And then this year, 2 other career teachers on the staff and myself, we were like, oh my gosh, this is taking way too long. Let's just go, make the posters, find a bathroom, and stick up the posters, and make the principal just deal with it. He's not going to take the posters down. Like, what is he going to do? So that's exactly what we did. We found the best bathroom that was centrally located and put up, gender neutral, anybody's welcome, gender diverse bathroom, and done. So even now, you think everything's been done, and what can we possibly do? No, there's a lot to be done, and like I said, anything you do in the classroom is powerful, because it might not seem like a lot to you, but it's a lot to people who are marginalized, and they're looking for people who are safe contacts. I think that might be my 5 minutes, pretty much. Okay, thank you very much.
What else can I say? I guess in the spirit of coming out stories, it happened for me around the same time as you, David. I was about 22, 1994, 95, and it was a time when there was no conversations like this. And if there were, they were pejorative. And I remember thinking that I'm going to go to UBC, I'm going to become a teacher, not because that's exactly what I wanted to do, but because I wanted to come out. And I thought living in Chilliwack, it was such a, at the time, a very, very bigoted little town. I couldn't do it there. And I come from a very cultural background as a Stala woman. And so it's very binary, as the residential schools taught us to be. And our two-spirited people were deleted. So I was one of the first ones that found the courage to bring it back. And I think it's happened. And so I went to UBC, I went through the teacher ed program, and it was unreal, the adversity I faced, even from my own teaching cohort colleagues. The things that they would say to me, and I don't know how I had the resilience to let it slide. I guess because I was fully on fire, and I came out with a vengeance. I wasn't necessarily an activist, but I I was Beyonce overnight, basically. And so it was just something that I couldn't conceal, and I was so happy to be free and to be myself that, I hope that it inspired others to do the same. Authenticity is definitely an issue for many people, heterosexual, cisgendered, gay, straight, no matter what. Authenticity is an issue. And when you have your underbelly, absolute underbelly bared to the world, you have to grow a thick skin. And I think some of us have become superpowered because of the way we have been treated in this world. And those of us who have survived that treatment have now made the world better. And I'm very grateful for everyone else that has shared their story. And I think that it's not necessarily always needed that we are active activists, because for the very reason that we get up and we breathe and we talk and we do our jobs, we're activists, because we're in the margins already. The activism itself is definitely necessary. However, like I say, for me anyways, just the fact that I get up and I show up and I go to work and I teach the children that some of my former colleagues told me I had no business teaching is activism. And I don't necessarily come out to the students. It's not something that is, in my own mind, always somebody else's business unless I care to share. All they have to do is Google my name and they can find out anything. It's such a different world now with the internet. They can find out anything, and that's unfortunate. I think that I was very fortunate to be in the last part of the time when there was no cell phones and there was no internet, and we played outside, and we had to work hard to look at inappropriate things the way the kids can just look at things at hand. So I'm grateful, and I hope that I hope and pray that I continue to teach children who come out to me. It's happened to me on more than one occasion, and every time that it's happened, it's made me bigger and stronger and more proud. And then I share my story with them, and it helps them feel the same kind of strength. And I hope that all of you have heard these stories, whether or not that it's something that will apply to you or not. But at least you can say you've been told. And that when you do have children that might have gender or sexuality issues, you might have a little bit of knowledge. Sometimes people will get uncomfortable and say, well, I don't know how to deal with this, let me find somebody who can. And that's a good first step. But I think you have tools now. We're all people. At the end of the day, we're all people. We all belong, and we're all good. So, thank you. I hope that I left something else that I can contribute to this beautiful banquet.
Good afternoon, human beings. Thank you for listening to us when you would, I'm sure, rather be having an after-lunch nap. I'm Chanelle Ty. I am a 10th year teacher. I am an out queer teacher, and I've been out since my first day in the profession, and it's been pretty rad. I really like it. I do a bunch of things other than teach. Last year, I was the provincial SOGI education lead with the Ministry of Education, so you might have seen me around. I did a bunch of conferences with new teachers, which means I supported 60 school districts in kind of making schools a safer, more inclusive place for LGBTQ2S plus teachers, students, and families. The year before that, I was our district's SOGI education lead at SOGI is sexual orientation and gender identity, if you didn't know. So I was the district SOGI person with the Conseil Scolaire Francophone, which is School District 93. So I supported 43 schools in our district to become less worse for queer people. And now I'm just like a regular old teacher. I teach grade 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 English. I'm exhausted every day. And I want to say a couple of things. I was very deliberate in coming out, and I come out to my students, all 7 trillion of them that I teach every year, because as you heard, I teach a lot of students, grade 4 to 9. I come out every single year within the first week of school. And it's important to me to do that because when I was a little gay bee at school, heavily closeted, I felt very alone. And I didn't look like this, because I feel like most of you, if you saw me on the street, wouldn't be like, I wonder if she's a queer. I think you probably would figure it out pretty quick. I didn't always look like this. And I think I was always looking for someone who looked like me and was like me, and being a person of color, often in school you don't see that reflected back. Being a woman who wants to be in leadership, a cisgender woman, you often don't see that reflected back. And so I made it one of my goals to come out. And I come out every year, but I have to come out 1 million times a year because 9-year-olds do not pay attention. They do not. So I get it, right? 16-year-olds don't either, it's true. So this last week, we just finished reading The Boy in the Dress, which is about a cisgender boy with his gender presentation is quite fluid, and he wears a dress. Surprise. And at the end of the book, one of my grade 4s was looking at me, and I was wearing this outfit, except I was wearing a shirt that said tomboy, and this little grade 4 said, Miss Chanelle, are you a boy or a girl? And I get this question all the time. And I was like, oh, well, what do you think? I'm gonna go with boy. And I was like, I can see why you think that, but actually I'm a girl. And he was like, but you have a wife. And I said, that is true. I do have one of those. He's like, okay. And this is in front of the whole class. This is not like at the board at recess. This is in front of everyone. So he's like, so that makes you a lesbian? And I was like, I can see why you would think that too. But actually, I'm not a lesbian. I prefer the word queer. I'm like, what am I doing? And he's like, what is a queer? I'm like, first of all, it's not a queer. But queer people, it's a lot of different things. In my case, it means I like a lot of different kinds of people. I don't just like women, but women are cute, so I can't help myself. And he was like, but you are a girl. I'm like, yes, correct. We've been over this. And you have a wife. Yes, I do. And you do like women. I'm like, what is happening right now? And he's like, sounds like a lesbian to me. So all this to tell you, and the best part actually after that was like, he goes, in front of the whole class, he goes, I think I might be gay when I grow up. It sounds like a good option. And I don't know, he's 9, maybe he will be gay when he's older, maybe he won't, maybe he'll be pan, maybe he'll be asexual, maybe he'll be painfully single and confused, I don't know. But those moments happen for me so many times every year where I get to have these little hilarious, ridiculous, heartfelt conversations with my students. And I think that alone makes it worthwhile being an out teacher. And also for those kids who, I've had lots of kids come out to me real quick. Like within the first day of knowing that I'm queer, I get like floods of 9-year-olds telling me that they think that their best friends are cute. And the same thing with the older kids too. And it's an honor. And it's an honor to be that safe person for those people. but it's also an honor to be just a normal person that kids who aren't queer or kids who have queer people in their lives that I don't know about or that they don't know about yet, it's an honor to be an example of a kind and open and honest person for them. And so I would never, ever go back in the closet, ever. It's very cold in there and very dark. So if you, I want to speak to you, if you're a queer teacher and you're not out, I can't tell you what to do. But I can tell you that being an out teacher has been a wonderful thing for me. Not only in terms of how it affects my students, but how it affects me. Just being able to be my full, true self has been wonderful. And also being that person, like, I never had that as a kid. And lots of our students still don't have that. I've been in schools where there's 6 queer teachers and I'm still the only out one. And this isn't in 1994. I was not even a person really in 1994. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to do that. If you're not a queer teacher, I'm very sorry for you. It's an unfortunate thing that you're not in the club. But I do want to echo what my colleagues and my siblings in the queer struggle have said here. You don't know who's in your class. I remember when I was in PDP, we were talking about, would we have storybooks with queer characters in our classrooms when we were real teachers? And I was the only one who said yes. And people were like, well, I would only have storybooks with queer teachers, or only have novels with queer teachers, or only have articles with, or not queer teachers, queer characters, only have novels with queer people or about queer topics if I knew that there was a kid with 2 moms or a kid who was queer. But you don't know, right? Like, you don't know. You have no idea. My nephews have just billions of queer aunties, and their teachers don't know that. But it would be a shame if they didn't have that representation in their classroom. So even if you're not queer, again, very sorry you're not in this very exclusive club, but please, please do your part to use inclusive resources. I have a list. Write it down. Everybody get their pen out. I Dream Library has great, diverse queer characters of color, and so I Dream Library is a local Vancouver mom who was just so tired of not seeing queer people and people of color represented, and it's got like Muslim queer stories, and Christian queer stories, disabled queer stories, all people of color. Please use those resources. Soji 123 has a French resource list that I made, so I know it's good. So just search French resources. They also have other book lists. There's a Soji checklist, an inclusive classrooms checklist, also on Soji 123, on the Alberta page. That's true. Good job. There is also Out in Schools has workshops if you want to have people come in, but they also have a free film library. You just have to give them your email address, and they don't spam you. So that's nice and rare. There was one more. If you're in Vancouver, Community Pride Speaks, so community with a Q. They have young people come and tell their coming out stories, and they read a real storybook, or it's also for older kids, so they have a book that's not a storybook, but it's a story. And then young people come out to the students and have really great conversations. So if you're not lucky enough to be able to tell stories about your queer life because you're not queer or because you don't want to talk about it every day, please use these resources, because it is an incredibly excellent way to make your classroom an inclusive and inviting place.
So I find myself, I thought this was an enviable position, but this is an unenviable position of going last after everybody. And everybody has said so much wonderful stuff that I'm not going to talk too much about the sort of things that that these people spoke. I'm going to tell you a few, just for a minute here, about who I am, what my sort of background. And then I think I'm a spoken word artist, and I think what I'm going to do is do a poem. if that's okay to kind of close this part of it off, because it's telling a story about my sort of experience walking through the world, which I think will be a good way to end this sort of section. So Trevana Spilchen, I teach in Delta. I'm a music teacher. I'm also the SOGI coordinator for the district. I also sit on the Committee for Action on Social Justice, the LGBT, along with Chanelle, who's also on that committee right now, and other people who were in the past on that committee. And what else about me? I'm a musician. I teach high school music. I said that. I am a workshop facilitator. I've been all over the province, literally, in the last few years, every single corner, which is fabulous, doing mostly gender workshops, but other workshops as well. I'm also, which is very important for me to acknowledge, I'm a settler on this territory, and all of the responsibilities and everything that goes along with that. So I do want to mention that. I also want to talk about my family. I am married to a wonderful partner, and I have 4 kids, which is perhaps 4 more than I thought I would have when I was younger. And 4 cats as well, which is also more than I thought I would have. But there you go. There's symmetry, right? I had 4 kids, so I had to have 4 cats. Actually, I had 4 cats first. Anyway, so I had to have another kid. And it's interesting. I have my oldest daughter is turning 20 in about a week and a half, and she is at Ryerson. In Toronto. I have twins that are graduating from McGee in Vancouver. One will graduate for sure. The other one, I'm not sure if he's going to make it, but we're hoping. But he will graduate. And then I have a 19-month-old girl who is wonderful. And I spent the whole morning this morning cuddling and watching Beauty and the Beast, which is not my favorite Disney movie, but she picked it. So that's the one she wanted to watch. So that's my wonderful life. I'm super happy. I'm so glad I'm out. And I wasn't out when I started teaching. I wasn't out for a long time. I've only been out for 3 or 4 years, and it's changed my life immeasurably for the better. I can't even describe the difference. So I'm going to do a poem for the last couple minutes of my time here. And leave you with that, which, like I said, this poem is sort of a little glimpse into me walking through the world. And I think we're going to get a lot of stories through the rest of this time anyway, and so I'll have a chance to say that. But right now, I am Wonder Woman, by which I mean people look at me and wonder, woman or man? Most accurately, I'm trans, the in-between stuff, the oh-so-queer stuff. And while I do not have a magic lasso that makes people tell the truth, I do have the magical ability to make people stare at me awkwardly, which in turn reveals the truth of their feelings, their true feelings about me. Because one of 2 things inevitably happens when I stare back. They either give me this, shit, I was staring at you, and now I feel like a douchebag kind of smile, and I relax and know they're basically okay. Or they give me this, you are a disgusting human being who shouldn't even exist in this world kind of scowl, and I tense up, ready for an argument or maybe even something worse. As superpowers go, making people stare at me awkwardly would not have been my first choice. I mean, it does keep me safe sometimes and gives me awkward, hilarious stories to tell my friends, but it also amplifies transphobic hatred and sometimes makes me feel like a disgusting human being that shouldn't even exist in this world. Maybe if William Marston had created me, I'd have the same bulletproof bracelets he gave Wonder Woman, and I could simply raise them up, bouncing those searing sneers back at the perpetrators. Maybe if I had superhuman strength of character, I could just carry the weight of this hatred on my shoulders without noticing. But what people think weighs on me, and sometimes I can't bear to twirl into the superhero suit, and I wish I was just a woman. Without the wonder, without the fear, without the questions I just don't have the strength to answer today. And I hate myself for hiding and often feel I haven't earned the term woman. Like I've fallen short of being she, fallen short of being me. The other day, I threw on a hoodie, shorts, flip-flops with no bra to go to the grocery store, hoping to hide within the binary, only to quickly realize that my legs were still silky smooth shaven and my toes still wore the pretty purple shine from my first ever pedicure, a birthday present for my daughters. No trouble to tell I was hiding from the world and from myself. No need to even use that lie detector test you also created, William Marston. You know I'm guilty. You and I both know no matter what I put on, there's a Wonder Woman underneath, just like Diana Prince. And I wonder, does she hate herself for hiding? Are there days when she wishes she was just a woman? Just one of the girls in this patriarchal world only trying to be normal, whatever the heck that means. Me, I'm just waiting for the day when I can say I am Wonder Woman and actually believe it's true.
Okay, so I told you, what a panel, right? So now it's time for questions. So if you have any question and you don't really want to walk here, raise your hand and I bring the mic to you. Any question in the room for this panel?
Very much for all of those. That's very, very powerful. I feel very privileged to be here and have heard that. I'm a TTOC. I trained in secondary, biology and French, and I love my subjects because I think it gives me easy tools to talk about diversity. Biology, obviously, that is the definition of diversity. And in French, because it's such a binary language, everything is male or female. Every time I talk about anything that has male or female, or masculine and feminine in it, I also always bring in gender neutrality and try to kind of normalize it and just make it that it's not something that I flag up, it's just part of my teaching. And I'm telling you that a table is feminine in French, and I'm telling you that I can't think of anything masculine in French. And then when we talk about, talking about blue and white and gray, that this is what we do for masculine things and this is what we do for feminine things. And if we're talking about people, this is what we would do for someone who is gender neutral or identifies differently to how they present. And I've never ever talked about anything overtly because I thought the best strategy to make people feel relaxed and part of our class is just to make it normal and not bringing it to the focus of attention. And I just wondered, am I wrong? Is it something that I should actually make a teachable part of my lesson and say, this is why I'm talking about it in this way?
Depends is my answer. I think there is definitely a benefit in normalizing differences, but also I don't think we're at the place where kids will naturally pick that up. So if you're making a decision for justice, you should tell them why you're doing it.
To answer your question, I just use it because I've been studying French. I understand the concept you're asking, but even in my classroom in English, I avoid gendered terms. I don't know if this is answering your question, but I will purposely say friends or folks. I never say boys and girls in class, and except I will sometimes do it. And I was actually going to mention this in the opening thing, around disrupting gender. When gender is confronted with me in a way that I find oppressive, I will call it, and we'll have a discussion about it in class. And around the language around they, because I have a student who's gender neutral, and they use the term they, and I use they, and everybody knows that that's the term that we're using. So I do think it's such a rich topic, probably especially in French, because it's a gendered language. So yeah, those opportunities for those discussions are very powerful, I would say.
Hi there. My name is Jessica, and I am from the Wet'suwet'en Nation. And I would like to share, with language, I feel like how you talked about French. Indigenous languages are more kind of inclusive, where they identify as them or they as well. When you hear the language being spoken. Something that I'm trying to encourage my teachers to do at school at UBC is to also recognize place names. I lived in Prince George for 2 years, and that's not my community, but I got to learn more about them. So Prince George is called Klitli Tene, meaning people of the two rivers. Most of indigenous groups are recognized as people of or around place names. Anyways, what I was learning in my anthropology class, it was being taught by someone who was identified as gay, and he ended up marrying a Gitsan, and I thought it was so interesting because in his classes he always talked about how kind of oppressed the LGBT community is, and I kind of reflected it as like how oppressed indigenous people grow up as well. So it was interesting to see a comparison almost. And I thought it was really beautiful that he found someone who I think could bring kind of like the confidence in him too. And I also worked at Spencer's, which is a LGBTQ community. Like it's kind of like they are very inclusive. And what kind of blew my mind was how one of the customers came in the store and they were snickering, like, what does LGBTQ mean? And I had to explain to them. I had the privilege to work with other Indigenous students or other Indigenous people there. My boss was Native. I even worked with a transgender person at this, and I feel like your presence is important. It's to include more open-minded, and we had a transgender group who had Sunday meetings all the time in the Indigenous room over at, it's called the Aboriginal Resource Center over at CNC. So they would meet up every Sunday, and they would, I would be doing my homework Saturday and Sunday at school, and they would let us use the room at the facility. And one day I came in, and one of the students who was in that group was beaten up. And I thought, like, it blows my mind to see that there's still like such hate within the world. And I think one of the slogans that they use at Spencer's is "Love is love." And I feel like the world needs more of that. So I just want to thank you guys for being here and sharing your stories with us, because I think they really need to be heard. And I think maybe a quarter or a third of my friends are either gay or transgender, and I value them in my life. They show such confidence and courage, and I think that needs to be shared as well. Thank you.
Like a little story that I just wanted to share briefly, echoing what you were talking about the importance of being out to your, or in your school, because you really never know who is going to be listening. At the end of the school year, during the farewell, one of my teacher colleagues just acknowledged, or wanted to acknowledge the importance of me being out, because by doing that, it gave students permission to also be out. A few of my students have made homophobic remarks to me, and those really caught me off guard, so I didn't really know what to do in those situations other than to send them to the office. And thankfully, my admin is super supportive of me and of SOGI principals, so the principal really took care of that, had them apologize to me in person. But you know, what else can I do as a gay teacher to my students when they say terrible things to my face, to me?
About the way you've been treated by your students, I'm not sure what your school culture is, but I would think that it would be important to meet with the other teachers, form some allies, and bring some policies into the school that are how to deal with that kind of behavior, and bring in some speakers to talk to the students about language, and also to have a plan in place of how to deal with that between you and your AO, and the union. So I think that there should be some things that you could put in place, but I would bring it to staff meeting and start to say, we need a plan, and this is happening in my classroom, and I need my colleagues to be allies with me and support me, and we need to deal with this as a school-wide program.
I don't know. I think for me, I would pray for them, for those students, and I would forgive them because they know not. And so their actions and their, the way they treat you, it's blindsiding to be abused by children. I understand that firsthand. But I've come to terms with those moments, and I understand that they're coming from such communities in their own homes. And the best that you can do, other than the legal actions that you can take, is to pray for them and forgive them, because it isn't about you, it's about them.
Please don't forget that students are also allies. So if you have students who are problematic, you can harness the power of students to teach their, how do you say that in English? Camarades de classe, classmates, to teach their classmates. So if you have a Soji club, maybe they want to do some workshops. Maybe you want to enter into some restorative justice with these students, because yes, they don't know how incredibly painful it is to be the subject of homophobic bullying, but also they know that that's a dick thing to do. And our job is to help them become better human beings. And so one way to do that is through restorative justice and peer support.
There's been all kinds of great ideas as far as building community and responses to that I don't think I need to say too much more.